When we read tarot or oracle, each card holds its own meaning. But I think when the magic happens is when two cards come together. They spark a conversation and can reveal even deeper insights. And sometimes the most unexpected pairings can bring forward the richest interpretations. I think we all have experienced that. It's almost like how contrasting personalities in relationships can create balance and growth. And just like in love, tarot has its own version of opposites attracting. I think we see that all the time. So today I wanted to explore how these unexpected card pairings can create some of the most insightful readings. And opposites attract, if you will, just a little another nod to Valentine's Day this season, but in a different way. So let's take a look at our first duo. We have the Lovers and the Devil. And I have 3 decks here with me to showcase these. I thought it would be nice to see how different decks depict them, a more classical version. With the JK Tarot here, I pulled out my Morgan Greer, which is still a classic and RWS clone. And then I have my Spacious Tarot here as well. So I think right off the bat here, we can really get a feel for the duality in each of these cards, which makes them feel pretty similar. We have 2 people often represented in these depictions for the Lovers. We often see them coming together in some sort of unity, right? And then the Devil almost has them, they're chained, but they're far apart, which can speak to attachment and temptation in a way. And they really are definite polar opposites. Obviously, the Lovers represents love and harmony and conscious choice, and the Devil represents that unhealthy pattern or unhealthy patterns that we might come across in our life. But I think when they are paired together, these 2 cards create a pretty fascinating dialogue about relationships specifically, about personal freedom, and about the fine line between love and obsession, because we don't always see that line, do we? The Lovers represents making conscious, heart-centered decisions, and the Devil can indicate feeling trapped in that or bound by fear or even unhealthy, maybe toxic attachments. The pairing, when we are speaking about choice versus control, is or poses the question, are you making choices freely, or are you being influenced by temptation or external forces? When we think about the Lovers and the Devil together, often what can come up is healthy versus toxic relationships. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. We, in our lifetimes, we come across many types of relationships. We are children, we are parents, some of us, we are friends, we might have lovers. But the duo can highlight the contrast between relationships that are based on a mutual love and those that are maybe more rooted in like control or even addiction or codependency. I think that's a good one too. That's become really relevant. That word codependency has kind of come forward a lot in recent years, but it's a powerful combination for examining dynamics in a relationship. Another way we can see these 2 paired together is like a spiritual connection, or on the other hand, with the Devil, we have material obsession. And the Lovers can symbolize like a very soulful union, feeling very connected on a soulful level with someone. Whereas the Devil could suggest that maybe we are being overly focused on physical attraction perhaps, or status, or even perhaps power, right? I think the Devil just drips power, and that's very attractive to people. So a good question to ask in relation to that is, are your relationships and desires aligned with your higher self, or are they being driven more by your ego? The Devil really speaks to illusion a lot of the time, which is kind of similar or can be relatable to the Magician in a way. But speaking about, the Devil in this opposites attract to the Devil here, while the Lovers can encourage that unity and alignment and that higher feeling, that higher alignment, I guess, the Devil can expose like literal chains that we place on ourselves. And this pairing, if you ever receive it in a reading, depending on the context, of course, could signal the need to break free from the limiting beliefs, toxic habits, external influences, anything that can cloud your judgment. So when this comes up in a reading that's maybe relationship based, that's speaking about balance or making choices or even attachments or patterns, I think that these are true opposites. And they tell a story about, we don't know what happened from beginning to end here, if we can call it the end, but everything started out in this way, feeling super connected and like one and very luminous. But somehow it could turn, right? It could definitely turn. And what can come forward from that is sometimes we don't bring in our logical selves and we get lost, like being lost in the woods here with the Spacious Tarot, which is very terrifying. But I think overall, this pair reminds us that love and temptation can really walk hand in hand. It's a very fine line. But don't be scared by that. I think the real power lies in awareness and choice. Our next pairing that we have here is the Tower and the Star, which are literal neighbors in the tarot. So I don't know, these feel definitely like natural opposites just for that reason alone. So let's talk about it. So at first glance, the Tower and the Star, they might seem like two completely different energies. One that represents more the chaotic side and destruction, and the other represents hope and renewal. But together they can tell one of the most powerful stories in tarot and one of the most beautiful, in my opinion, the breakdown that leads to the breakthrough. And if you notice, breakdown and breakthrough both have break in the word. So if that doesn't kind of send some chills down your spine, it's really fascinating. Some themes to explore in this duo here is that destruction is necessary growth. So the Tower, it shakes our foundation. It brings down crumbling illusions and anything that has been built on very unstable ground. Like this tower is literally in the middle of an ocean. How stable can that really be? This tower here is, I forget specifically what these are called, but they're built and you never know when it could come crashing down, right? It could be just one little gust of wind. It could be an animal trying to perch on the top. It could be a storm. But it feels very uncomfortable and shocking, and it can feel unexpected. Sometimes we can feel that brewing in our lives, but directly following after, the Star follows the Tower as a reminder that with destruction and after destruction, there often comes clarity, healing, and the opportunity for a fresh start. Now, going back to speaking on sometimes when we might feel the Tower brewing in our lives, it kind of feels like that dark night of the soul, and on the opposite end, that spiritual awakening. And we experience moments in life where everything feels like it's falling apart with the Tower. Only later, maybe it's not directly after, but only later down the line to realize that it led to a higher path. And in that context, this pairing asks, like, what is being stripped away to reveal your true essence? There's something that needed to crumble in order for you to rise anew. Another way we can look at this duo is releasing old to make room for the new, to like the spiritual awakening and dark night of the soul. But the Tower can be a reminder to clear away what is no longer serving us. And then the Star guides us towards our true self, right? With the light, the star. And in that context, this duo can really bring you to trust. And that, again, sometimes breakdowns are breakthroughs in disguise. And as much as we don't want it to be that, it's sometimes what is definitely needed. This duo definitely represents overall the balance between chaos and calm. I think this is often a much larger scale or a more dramatic scale of the Temperance card, which we see Temperance successfully being able to balance two completely different elements, or at least that's how it feels to me. And even in the Star, Temperance has those two cups, and the Star is often depicted with two jugs here. But the Tower we could see as fire, destruction, that more wands, fire type energy. And the Star is that cool water that rushes in, that it puts out the fire, but what's left, we can look and we see the rubble and the debris. But it's often the peace that we kind of need to be able to begin to pick up and move on. And that kind of reflects the natural cycle of death and rebirth, which ties into the Death card. It speaks about upheaval and restoration, despair and renewal. When these cards come up, it could mean that something is crumbling, whether it could be a belief, it could be a relationship, it could be a life path, it could be anything, but it feels very overwhelming. But it's leading us to the truth. It's revealing the truth to us. And sometimes, and I remember this growing up as a kid, that, we were taught to always tell the truth will set you free. And yes, that's one way to look at it, and that's not wrong. But also, the truth can hurt. But the star promises that even though things feel uncertain, healing and clarity, they are on the horizon. Trust that this reset with the star is leading you to something better. And overall, I think this pair just exemplifies that you are not lost, or all is not lost. Even in the ruins, a new path is forming, literally. Hold on to that hope, because the star is waiting for you. So I think this is a very beautiful opposites attract pairing. And specifically here, I want to talk about the Spacious Tarot and how it's still very earth-centered in both of the cards, but it's such a different perspective. I mean, this person, they're standing there looking up at the night sky. They could literally be standing next to their toppled tower, but look how breathtaking that scene is. I don't know. I just wanted to point that out. Next, I wanted to bring in some Queen energy here with the Queen of Cups and the Queen of Swords. I love this. They're literally sitting back to back. Definitely two opposites. Opposite elements, opposite messages. But are they really? Are they really opposites? Let's talk about their dynamic. When the Queen of Cups and the Queen of Swords appear together in a reading, I think they create a dynamic interplay between heart and mind, emotion and logic, intuition and intellect, and while they may seem like opposites at first, their differences can actually very much complement and balance one another. The Queen of Cups represents the heart and rules with her heart and makes decisions based on emotions and intuition and deep empathy. She feels everything very intensely and seeks that emotional connection. The Queen of Swords rules with her mind. She values logic and clarity, truth, and cutting through illusions and that emotional fog that we can often come across to help us see situations more objectively. But the heart and the mind are two things that are necessary to come together, because too much emotion can really cloud our judgment, and it can be a slippery slope because emotions change. They are very fluid, right? It's hard to keep water in your hand because it slips right through. And that's very similar to our emotions. But on the flip side, being too logical, if that's even a thing, can almost come across very cold. So in their own ways, too much of them is often very out of balance, obviously. And I think a really good portrayal of this is the Three of Swords, because we often see it, three swords in a heart. And one day I was sitting down and the Three of Swords came up in a reading for me. And it was the first time I thought about, well, this is the sword suit. There's a literal heart in this. So why is this the heartbreak card? Why is it not the Three of Cups? Because that is the suit of emotion, right? And what I realized goes back to what I was saying before with the star and the tower, is that there is pain in truth and clarity, because the truth hurts. And the Three of Swords often represents those painful realizations, those difficult conversations, because swords is also about communication, or sudden clarity about something that really breaks the heart. For me, I try to keep that in mind, where the cup suit deals with the emotions from a more intuitive and flowing place, and the Three of Swords is upset that comes from a mental understanding, a cognitive understanding, that moment when you finally see the truth, even if it shatters your illusions, even if it shatters your heart. I think that is some of the most painful heartbreak to have, is that exact moment when you just know and you realize something, and it can be so sad and it can cut really deep. But going back to our queens here, the Queen of Cups often is about empathy, whereas the Queen of Swords can come off as almost detachment in a way. And what that can represent is when to feel and when to step back, and knowing that balance and those boundaries. These two together, setting those emotional boundaries, I think is a call to action when these two show up in a reading. Like, feel what you need to feel, but do not let those emotions overpower your reason, because you can sit there for a long time. And as an introvert and as an empath, or someone that feels very deeply and is very emotionally connected, I can say that that is one of the hardest parts about myself, is making such decisions sometimes, even small, silly decisions. The best analogy that I have to describe this is when I was in college, I went to a Chipotle for the first time. It was not in my rural area where I grew up, but in college they had one. And so I went in there and I was confronted with so many choices, and it was really busy. And I got up to the counter and it's like, well, do you want this, or do you want this, or do you want beef, or do you want chicken, or whatever it is. But I was so like overwhelmed with the fact that I had to make like instant choices without putting a lot of thought into it, that I just kind of turned around and left. And nowadays, I can eliminate that with ordering online first, so I can contemplate safely in my own home beforehand. But that really is a dilemma that I faced, that I was so like distraught, like emotionally a little bit, that I just kind of froze and I just was like, nope, not dealing with this. And I swept it under the rug. And you can stay with that swept under the rug for such a long time. And that analogy, I think, can work for more serious situations too. I mean, I've been in situations where I've lingered on a decision for so long that it just, I don't know, it got harder. The harder I sat on it, the more difficult it became, and the more emotionally I put myself like in a prison almost. But together they can teach us the importance of compassion with clarity, feeling again deeply, but not letting those emotions just kind of chain you in, almost like the Eight of Swords in a way. So the last thing I want to talk about with this duo here is like that intuition versus rationality, and that there's more than just these two ways of understanding the world, but within this context here we have these two. So the Queen of Cups really trusts her inner knowing, and what's fascinating about that is trust kind of inherently comes from that swords place. So the Queen of Cups embodies that swords energy and trusting that inner knowing, and she does often rely on her feelings, and almost sometimes, like, I don't know, Queen of Cups feels very Pisces to me, and like psychic awareness kind of a thing. But she uses that to navigate her life. So that being said, she integrates that trust, that mental trust, in her inner knowing, to guide her life. And then the Queen of Swords, she trusts her logic and her experience. But within her experience in her life, there have been emotional things that have happened, right? So she can rely on making factual based decisions rather than her gut feelings. And that's how she navigates her world. But the pairing together encourages us to both honor intuition and intellect. Some situations in life require you to really trust your gut, trust that inner knowing, while others might need a more like rational approach. So I think these two coming together really gives you the best like opportunity and option, and you're not pitting your mind and your heart against one another. And I think that often happens. I am personally more emotionally led than logically led. I definitely lead with my feelings. My heart is on my sleeve kind of a person. But I have noticed, like, going through life, that can really get you hurt. So bringing in that balance of the Queen of Swords amplifies those boundaries that you need. So I don't necessarily, like, obviously these are opposites, but when they come together, I don't know, it's just so beautiful. Okay, next we have here is the Fool, and probably not unexpected, but the World. The literal start and end of the major arcana. And this to me represents, these two together represent that infinite loop of growth, and that every ending is a new beginning, but every new beginning leads to where you want to go. The Fool is about the start of a journey where you're full of wonder and you're full of optimism and you're embracing the unknown. And the world is your final destination, that moment of mastery, of fulfillment and completion. And together, these cards remind us that once we complete one cycle, we inherently begin a new one. And we never stop growing and we never stop learning and evolving. But if we take a look at breaking down some of the opposites here, we have the Fool with a very beginner's mindset, approaching life with innocence and curiosity, that spontaneity, and just fully embracing adventure without fear, without thinking too much, really. The Fool is kind of my partner in the heart space, almost. That's what it feels like to me. Just going with what you feel and not really thinking about much else. And the world is almost like, I know most of the time they're depicted as opposite genders, which is also something interesting to note because we have both within us. We both have, or we all have feminine and masculine qualities. So that kind of completes us as one entity, one person. But we often see those different genders to represent both sides. But it's almost like the Fool starts out and he feels like he has everything he needs. He's packed kind of what he kind of threw together and is like, yeah, that'll work. And then we see this oftentimes the classical representation here of the almost fully unclothed woman within the wreath, and she's got her guides here and she's feeling freer than ever. She's almost feeling more free than the Fool, just taking that leap. And the world reflects that wisdom that we gained from that experience and showing that through trials and lessons along the way that we've come full circle. And this pairing together encourages us to balance that full openness and trust that the Fool has with the wisdom and the integration that the world brings forward. And it's really about trusting the process. You must take a leap, take a risk to reach the finish line. And I think about this recently with my manifestation box. Now, that was more, I guess, on the safer side risk, but I'm still pouring a lot of energy and a lot of intention into my manifestation and trusting the process, blindly trusting the process, putting in the work along the way, seeing what works and what isn't working and making adjustments and just taking the risk, and seeing the reward come in was just so beautiful. And the Fool reminds us that we need to take those risks and to step into that unknown. And the world is there to reassure us that everything is coming together and that all of the effort will lead to a conclusion that is meant for us. Even if the conclusion is a rejection or what have you, it is what is meant for us. Because at that rejection point, we start again as the Fool. So this duo here is perfect combination for anyone starting a new chapter while honoring the lessons of the past, because even though you're starting on a new adventure, you're bringing all that experience with you at the same time, but you're doing it on a new path, right? You're setting foot on a new path. And I think this is one of the most beautiful representations of opposites attract. I don't think we could have one without the other, and I think that's the whole gist of this exercise that I'm doing here today is without the one, we wouldn't have the other, and vice versa. We need both of those to have a full experience. And I just thought it would be a little fun and a little nice to take a look at like that opposites attract theme while we're around Valentine's Day here, because you hear that phrase thrown around so much, but I just love it because what one lacks, the other has, and vice versa. Neither of these is perfect. Even the world here, which signifies such beauty and experience and wisdom for one cycle completion, right? But the Fool still has something to offer the world. And the final pairing that I wanted to do today is one of the minors. So we have the Three of Wands here, and I had to consciously think from my perspective, from my vantage point, what is the opposite of the Three of Wands? And to me, that was the Eight of Wands. So we're going to take a look at this duo here, these opposites. Because I wanted it to be known that opposites don't just happen in the major arcana or within the court cards. And I didn't want to do like the Three of Cups and the Three of Swords something of that nature. So I really challenged myself to think about an unlikely pair that kind of are opposites. So we have here the Three of Wands and the Eight of Wands, which feel like complete opposites. One is waiting and planning and just taking their first steps, while the other is already in the movement, already in the action. But I think when they come together, they create this beautiful balance between being patient and momentum, being prepared, and that point where you reach execution, which can feel very swift. So some themes to explore when this pairing might come up here is when to wait and when to act. The Three of Wands represents like that moment of anticipation. You've started setting things in motion, but now you must wait here for the results. As you see these figures here, they're standing on a cliffs or a mountain edge here, and they're looking out, and their plans are already taking off. They have started, they're in motion, but now they have to wait to see how the dice rolls. And it's a lot about trusting the process and allowing those things to unfold naturally. Whereas the Eight of Wands is about hitting that gas pedal, about acceleration, things happening fast, decisions being made very quickly, and opportunities like arriving at your door full speed. But together, I think they remind us that timing is definitely everything, and some moments require way more patience and trust, while others, they require quick action and decisiveness. Another theme that kind of came to mind is that, again, that preparation versus executing. And the Three of Wands is like the strategist of the tarot, right? Or at least within the wand suit. And it's about making long-term plans and expanding your vision, putting markers along the way to expand your vision, and carefully considering the next step, being very strategic and tactical almost about that. And the Eight of Wands is the actual execution. It is the point of movement and communication and things falling into place at a rapid speed. So, for example, this figure here, this is a really good example because we see the ship in the background here, and it has already left the shore. It is already on its way. And this is the execution. It might start out slow because as we drift off and we catch wind with our sails here, we're more full speed ahead, right? So I think even in the Three of Wands, at least this specific depiction, it almost gives off that Eight of Wands energy in a way. Like we are waiting here at shore, but what we're putting out into the world is already out there and it's already in momentum. And even here, like, we're on this path already, and you know, Wands is about fire, is about passion, and definitely about movement. So even though the Three of Wands is more strategic about it, it's still ablaze already. And then another theme that came forward was from like being a visionary or envisioning what you're setting out to do to the reality of it. So the Three of Wands asks you to definitely have that faith that your efforts will pay off. And it's about trusting that what you've already set in motion will arrive in divine timing. And the Eight of Wands calls forward that when the time is right, things will move faster than expected. Sometimes the waiting and the planning suddenly lead to like this unstoppable flow of progress. And I think we've definitely all experienced that before in our lives. But together they show the natural rhythm of manifestation and you planting the seeds first. And then when the time is right, everything accelerates forward as it should be. So a beautiful pairing. So I just thought this would be a fun way to show the magic of opposites attract in tarot. And tarot, like life, is definitely full of contrast, full of light and dark, action and stillness, heart and mind, and these seemingly opposite energies, they don't cancel each other out, but what they do is create depth and balance and powerful insights when they're brought together. And when we see opposing cards in a reading that maybe are more obvious, like the Fool in the World or the Queen of Cups or the Queen of Swords, it's not about choosing one over the other. And I think that's such an important thing to highlight because that's what I felt. I was like, what do I do with these opposites when they come forward? Like, I don't quite understand how to read their energies, but it's not about choosing one over the other. It's a invitation to explore how these energies work together. and how they offer a more nuanced and more complete perspective. It's about what is working in one way that isn't working in the other, or recognizing that, you know, for the Queen of Cups here, maybe you've been way too much in your emotions. So the Queen of Swords is calling forward that more practical, logical approach that can help you wade through your emotions a bit better, to help organize them a little bit better so you don't feel so overwhelmed and off balance, right? Opposites also aren't enemies. I think they are partners in creating wholeness. And so I implore you that the next time you pull two seemingly contradictory cards, take a closer look at the story that they're telling together as a unit, because that's where the real magic of your reading happens or begins. Let me know in the comments, what is your favorite tarot opposites in the tarot? I would really like to know what pairing kind of brought you a beautiful moment of insight. Thank you guys so much for going on an explorative journey here with some tarot opposites. And until next time, see you around.